Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Here are some career ideas that most people would consider crazy, and they may be, but at least as a thought experiment, I would like to raise them for your consideration, and I'm going to lay out pros and cons of each. Don't go to college, maybe even drop out of high school. You might think certainly that's crazy. You hear endlessly that all good jobs require at least a college degree, or most of them, unless you're a genius like Bill Gates. And dropping out of high school? What are you going to be doing? Standing around doing nothing with a Mick job? And yet an argument can be made for not going to college, certainly graduate school, and maybe even dropping out of high school. Think about the percentage of the time you spend being taught and trying to learn all that material that you learn in college, whether it be the intricacies of Shakespeare, whether it be the geometric theorems, proving the geometric theorems, or stochastic processes in chemistry, or the causes of the Peloponnesian Wars and the War of the Roses and the War of 1812 and the Mexican War, etc. And then learning foreign language where you really never learn it well enough to really be able to speak it, even barely, except maybe restaurant Spanish or French. Compare that what you could otherwise be doing with your time. Perhaps some combination of mentorships with one of your parents' friends or one of your own friends, or simply digging up somebody who you really respect. If you're persistent enough, you usually can get a series of these mentorships where you might learn a hell of a lot more than you learn in the academic environment, because they say those who can do, those who can't teach. You can read what you want to read, what you're motivated to read, instead of having this mammoth reading list that the college professors require you to take for your general education courses or even in high school. We're all motivated to learn and read certain things, or watch YouTube videos of them, or take some online courses that are nearly free from some of the greatest universities, and from just great practitioners, whether it be on udemy.com or Coursera. And you'll have saved an unbelievable amount of money compared to the cost of going to college. And probably a lot of the time you'd be spending, you're going to be earning some money. So the cost difference is absolutely enormous. So while it may seem crazy to drop out of high school, and certainly to not go to college or graduate school, an argument can be made for the self-starter doing that. Next argument I want to make is to argue for making the admittedly difficult choice to choose to live in a basement or a backyard apartment or a cottage in a bad neighborhood. The American dream is the single-family home with a white picket fence. But the decision to do that in a good neighborhood is the most expensive decision. It so restricts the amount of career choices you have. It pretty much eliminates your being able to choose a creative career unless you're with a 1 in a million. And the reality is that the amount of safety increase of living in a good neighborhood is very small relative to the cost, as long as you take reasonable precautions. Nobody's saying you're going to walk around in skimpy clothes in the middle of a bad neighborhood. But if you keep your doors locked and you go out when it seems safe, that little incursion on your freedom is relatively small relative to the enormous benefits of the freedom you get to choose many, many more careers that are appropriate, and whatever career you choose, to be more ethical. The next seemingly crazy career idea I'm going to suggest is to avoid careers where you go deep into technology. The field is so overcrowded. We've told everybody, major in technology, major in technology, major in technology. So many people do it, there's even an oversupply of PhDs. Perhaps the most vivid memory of my career life was when I was asked to give a talk on planning for your career at the Society for Neuroscience International Conference. They have 10,000 people going, but because mine was just a small little concurrent session, I thought I'd get 25, 30 people there. There were 500. And at the end, there were probably 300 people lining up to ask me, I've got a PhD in neuroscience and I can't get a job. Any advice? So you're dealing with an incredibly competitive job market and dealing with the very, very smartest people. It's smarter to avoid that. Sure, learn enough technology so you can speak, you can converse with the experts, and therefore perhaps sell technology or manage a technology group. And if you are a salesperson for a technology company, very often that is a pipeline toward advancing to management and becoming an executive. Because in the end, like all businesses, and nonprofits, sales, bringing in the dollars is key. So I just would avoid your going really deep into technology unless you're one of those kids who at age 10 was programming in artificial intelligence. But if you're a normal human being, The smart money is to do what is seemingly crazy, which is to avoid technology. Another way to avoid technology, by the way, is to start what I call a zero-status clonable business. My quintessential examples of that are flower carts or gift item carts that are located near busy bus or train stations. Unlike food there, which has a ton of regulations, there aren't a lot of regulations. And you can't automate those, you can't offshore those, and your rent is extremely low, and it may even be free. Selling those kind of items would be the baseball cap of the team du jour, umbrellas when it's raining, as I said, scarves. Amazing scarves because they're so light, and amazing from the beautiful scarves that are made in India can be bought, if you buy it right, for $1 a piece, and the shipping cost is next to nothing. And they, as long as you choose timeless designs, you can sell them forever. Those kind of businesses work really well. You're not going to get rich with one of those carts or stands, but once you've got it working very well, you can then clone it and go to you hire your friend to manage, or a trustworthy friend, a personable friend to run that cart, that stand, and then you go find other locations. And when you've had about a half dozen, that should get you enough money to make a solid upper middle class living and still have time for a life, and with far lower risk than most self-employment. But the key is to remember that status is the enemy of contentment. When you do end up choosing a business or any occupation that is not very popular among the graduates of Berkeley and Stanford or whatever, you have far greater chances of success, and you'll still feel great about yourself as long as you're providing a good product or service at an ethical price. The next crazy idea, seemingly crazy idea that I want to share for you that's career-related is to be what I call wildly elitist. We are told ever more today that we need to treat everybody equally. We need to not be judgmental, but I want to say that is only advice that is for public consumption. Privately, those very same people, if they're talking to their family members, will tell them the opposite. And I'm telling you the same thing that most people tell to their kids or loved ones in private. Be very discerning. The word judgmental is a negative, has negative connotation. But the idea of being discerning in where you work, the people who are going to work there, who your bosses are going to be, who your friends are going to be, platonic or romantic. We all know we grow more and feel better about ourselves dealing with people who are at least as good as us, good as us, intellectually, emotionally, ethically, etc., than if we're trying to be kind. Everybody who knows who tries to create reclamation projects takes somebody who's deeply flawed and say, you know what, I'll work with that person and make them better. In general, the odds are very, very against you, and more likely you'll be brought down or certainly kept from flowering into the person you could be. The next supposedly crazy idea I have is to consider eschewing work-life balance. As I said, those who can do, those who can't teach. And many people who are trying to teach us how to live our lives are people who have not been successful in the real world, and so they really value work-life balance. But I've had the privilege of having been career and personal coach to some of the most successful people on the planet and some real strugglers. And most of the successful ones really do value spending much of hours 40 through 70 working, rather than the vaunted recreation time or even family time playing Monopoly with your kids or whatever. I'm not saying you should spend all of every week hours 40 to 70 doing that, but I can say that I certainly would like to encourage you to avoid falling for the labeling that those work-life balance advocates have for people who work more than 40 hours. They call them workaholic, like alcoholic, like it was a pathology. I would rather call it heroic. The final thing I want to talk about is I love creative activity. I play the piano, and I'm an actor and I'm a director as hobbies. I was a professional pianist when I was a kid, but as much as I love those things, I realize that the odds of succeeding in one of those creative endeavors, unless you're enormously talented, driven, and usually have connections, is very small. So I don't want you to give up that deep love. I love that stuff to death. Make it a really serious, deep hobby, but unless you're really willing to live in true dire poverty, it's probably wiser to treat it as a hobby rather than as your career. Even though all the experts are saying, follow your passion, do what you love, I like to be a moderating influence. So even though it's crazy for me to say that, don't follow your passion, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'll summarize again. Point one, consider not going to college, certainly graduate school, and maybe even dropping out of high school because of the opportunity cost. What could you otherwise be doing with the time and certainly the money? Making the difficult decision to live in a basement or backyard apartment in a bad neighborhood, the actual danger is pretty small as long as you're reasonably prudent, and the amount of dollar savings is so enormous as to afford you tremendous freedom in terms of the kind of careers you can pursue. Avoid going deep in technology. The competition is so fierce because that's the word that's been given out everywhere, and especially in an era where so much work product in high tech can be done in low-cost countries and sent over the internet. You have a really tough time unless you're one of those kids who was programming in AI and brilliantly from age 10. You're probably wise to avoid technology. Just be technological enough so you can be conversant enough to either sell it, talk with techies, or even, if that's not you at all, just avoid it. There are opportunities without being technical, and the example I like to give is indeed the starting a low-status, clonable business. For example, a gift card or stand near a busy train station where you're selling scarves or the football jerseys of the team du jour, or umbrellas when it's raining or whatever, and then clone it when you've got the first one running smoothly. Hire your friends to staff that, and then open a few more until you've had a half dozen, which should give you enough money to make a solid upper middle class living. The next tip I offered was being wildly elitist. We're told to be redistributive, to care about the least among us, that we're all really equal, to not be judgmental. I would rather say it's important to be discerning, and that means to do what people who are really successful tell their kids and their loved ones in private, which is to hang out, whether it be at work or outside of work, with people who bring out the best in you, who are usually as bright or brighter, ethical or more ethical, kind or more kind than you are. And finally, I don't want you to give up your deep creative love, whether it be art or music or writing or whatever, but unless you really are profoundly talented and likely driven and with great connections, you're wise to consider that a hobby, a serious hobby, unless you're really willing to risk living in dire poverty or have somebody else take care of you. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I thank you for watching. I'm Marty Nemko.